すまなかった、レナ。俺はどこかでレナの話を疑ってたよ。本当にすまない。
ううん、いいよ、ケイチ君。そのおかげで待ち伏せをやり過ごせたんだしね。
あいつらは何者なんだ。そのお社様信仰を復活させようとする信者の集団の手先。
彼らにはそういう自覚はないと思う。彼らを操っている黒幕はそうなんだと思うけどね。多分ダム戦争の当時から陰で様々な工作をしてきた連中なんだと思う。
ダム戦争の最中に園崎家が裏でいろいろと暗躍したって話は俺も少しは聞いたことがあるな。
うん、有名な話だよね。これは大石さんに聞いたんだけど、ダム戦争の最中に誘拐事件があったんだって。これも秘密の事件なんだけど、なんでも建設大臣の孫を誘拐してダム建設中止の約束を裏取引したんだって。
大臣の孫を誘拐？おいおい、そんなの聞いたことないぞ。
大臣が犯人との取引に応じる姿勢を見せたため、事件を公にしないことになったんだって。大石さんは当時その事件に関わったから知ってるんだって。
うん。それで
大石さんが言うには、孫の誘拐や大臣の脅迫などの手口は恐ろしいほどに高度だったんだって。その事件は園崎家が命令を下したことだけは分かっているけど、結局未解決なんだって。当時園崎家の当主である園崎お涼は武装闘争の方針を打ち出していて、配下である暴力団組織の中に特攻隊を組織したそうなの。ダム計画の撤回がどうしても望めないときは建設省に突入して武力制圧しようなんて、そんな物騒な計画を本気で練っていたらしいの。
It up me to skip that, but anyway. Everyone knows the Sonozaki family had tried to stop the dam project, even if it meant breaking the law. So I wasn't so surprised to hear that she had a dangerous plan like that. Actually, I wouldn't be surprised if it was Mion who came up with the idea. The plan sounded just like her.
結局その計画は計画のままで終わったんだけど、それを実行するための特攻隊の訓練というのは行われていて、相当高度なものだったらしいよ。
Sorry again, I keep skipping. Jesus fuck. Anyway, in the end, the plan ended up as nothing more than that, but the Special Attack Corps actually did undergo training, and very high-level training at that. Oishi had uncovered the information right after the dam conflict had, ended. At the time, Oryo even said that if the village was going to be submerged, all members of the Onigashiki Guardians would choose to stay in their houses and drown. So because Oryo was behind those things, I couldn't just laugh off the idea of an armed assault on the Ministry of Construction. According to the information Oishi seized, she planned a suicide mission as a last resort when the dam conflict started to heat up, in case their resistance wasn't successful. She had actually obtained weapons and put people through training for the sake of the plan. The Special Attack Corps were flown to America, having received a huge amount of money from Oryu for the operation. In the southern desert of the United States, some retired military soldiers gave them highly professional training. While the plan was never carried out, the Special Attack Corps became a death squad under the direct control of Oryu after they came back from America. They were involved in many unresolved terrorist incidents, and they succeeded in kidnapping the grandson of the minister as well. See, so again, like I mentioned before we were having issues with stream, I don't believe this happened at all. Mainly because people tend to like it doesn't make any sense. Like from the lack of communications between like just Japan and the US in the 80s. By that I mean with how hard it was to communicate with people. Like Audio needs to literally have like Japanese military connections, and then from there they need to also have American connections, and then they need to have connections with some dudes in the middle of some fucking desert that's willing to train like whatever Japanese like squad mates they send over, or whatever Japanese people they send over to America, who probably also don't speak English, to be trained to be, you know, fucking mercenaries or killers or whatever. Like, it doesn't make any sense. That and like the people that were chasing after Dana, if they wanted her killed, they like she'd be dead already. If they wanted her kidnapped, she would have been kidnapped already. Like, they would not hesitate. It would be very quick and easy. They would sneak into her house at night and just kidnap her without her knowing. It's something simple like that. Anyway.
嘘みたいな話だな。
みーちゃんがよく ヘリの操縦から無線機まで何でもできるみたいなことを言うでしょ。あれは本当。みーちゃんも当時その訓練に参加してるらしいよ。
じゃああいつ本当に。
まあみーちゃんの話はともかく、このひなみ沢には大臣の孫すらも誘拐できるだけの暗殺部隊が存在するってことだけは疑っちゃダメ。
I didn't take a close look at the 4 men in the white van today, but thinking about it, they did look professional in a way. They were pretending to just be taking a break, but I could tell they were tense the whole time.
それであいつらはレナの命を狙っているのか。
Right, and that's the other hint that kind of tells you, like, hey, these people, like, you know, they're not pros. Like, they're not these, like, trained killers. Or, I mean, if Audio has these people, it wasn't the people she sent after Rena. Because they were tense. They would not be tense. These dudes would not even let you see them. They would hide in plain sight. Like, that's how they would probably handle this. But anyway.
多分狙ってはいないと思う。殺すだけだったら私もう殺されてるよ。
Right.
じゃあ狙いはまさかあれか。高野さんのスクラップ帳。
圭一君が見た通り、連中は相当警戒心が強いみたいで、隙を見つけない限りは強引な手段に訴えてこないみたいなの。だって強引な連中なら私の自宅の寝込みを襲えばいいんだから。
それをしないってことは結構慎重だってことになるな。
Yeah, like, even taking it cautiously, it doesn't, like, it doesn't matter. Remember, Audio's whole clan, or even, like, the Onigafchi Guardians, all the three families, are known for torturing information out of their, you know, victims. So it's, like, they would just need to kidnap Rena, and then torture her until she gives up, which, presumably, she would. Right? They have no idea that Rena is, like, a psychopath or some shit. I don't fucking know. But anyway.
多分私がスクラップ帳を持っているという確信がないからだと思うの。彼らはミオさんを殺し、持っていたスクラップ帳を全て処分しようとした。ところが一番重要な数冊が抜けていた。それで自分が狙われているのを察して誰かに預けたんじゃないかと考えてるんだと思うの。その有力候補が私なんだと思う。でも確証がないから強引な手段に訴えられないんだろうね。
レナ、お前かなりヤバい橋を渡ってるんじゃないのか。
そうだね。ちょっと怖いかな。でもそう簡単には消されないよ。私は大石さんと連携している。有事の際に備えて常に連絡を取り合っているしね。
そうだ、大石さんはどう言ってるんだよ。
大石さんも園崎家が何らかの暗躍をしていないか監視してくれてるよ。
高野さんのスクラップ帳の話はしたのか。
話してない。
警察には話した方がいいだろう。それに警察ならきっと力になってくれるぞ。
圭一君、私は君にだって信じてもらえるか自信がなくて話せないでいるんだよ。大石さんに話したって絶対に信じてもらえるわけがない。
なあレナ、もう煙に巻くのはなしだ。話してくれ。一体何なんだ。何がスクラップ帳に書いてあるんだ。高野さんが消されるほどの何が書いてあるんだ。
簡単に言うと、このスクラップ帳に書いてあることが事実なら彼らの神が貶められることになるの。
神を貶める。
そう、お社様の神聖性が失われてしまう。だからお社様信仰を復活させようとする彼らは絶対に伏せたいと思っているの。
すまんレナ、もう少し分かりやすく言ってくれ。つまりどういうことなんだ。
つまりお社様は神様じゃないってことなの。
神様じゃない。
I had no idea what she read that made her so certain. But whatever it was, it'd be sacrilegious for people who believe so strongly in Oyashiro-sama.
お社 社様の教えっていくつもあるけど、その原点はたったの一つしかない。それは中から出るな、外から入るなというもの。この大原則を守るためにその他の教義を発展させたと言ってもいいくらい。隣人を愛せとか家内安全とか縁結びの神様なんてのは本当に後から取ってつけたものでしかないの。
Interesting. Viewing him as a god of marriage and domestic prosperity. Yeah, I don't think they had explained what kind of god he was supposed to be, but I guess now we have some hint, as to what he's supposed to really represent. In other words, Oyashiro-sama existed solely to stop the villagers from going outside the village. Oyashiro-sama doesn't bless the villagers or protect them from disasters. The people believe that Oyashiro-sama does all of that for them, but the truth is that the people abused his name for that purpose, generation after generation, and nothing more than that. Crazy. Why did Oyashiro-sama descend in the first place? Because ogres came out of the Onigashiki swamp and attacked people.
実はこの時点で解釈が違ってたの。鬼が湧き出して襲ったんじゃない。湧き出したものにやられると人々を襲う鬼になるの。
湧き出したもの？どういう意味だよ、レナ。
Whatever came out of the swamp possessed people, crawled into their blood, controlled them, and turned them into ogres. People had no resistance against whatever it was that came out of the swamp. They became ogres and attacked the other villagers, and turned them into ogres as well. That's right. It was a weird infectious disease that broke out from the swamp. It made the infected people go out of control. The villagers saw this disaster and explained it like so. Evil ogres came out from the bottom of the swamp, possessed people, and turned them into ogres as well. That is the truth of the story of the ogres that came out of Onigashiki swamp. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense because I kind of hypothesized something similar to that, I believe, last time. And if that makes sense, those who have quote-unquote the blood of the ogre, right, are those who quote-unquote intermingled with ogres in the past, according to like the Hinamizawa lore, which means that those who became one with it, or with them, ended up becoming like immune or something to this disease. And assuming that the parasitic relationship that Rena thought about beforehand involving, the maggots and all that shit, if that is real, then that means that those who are part of, like, say, the three families have some sort of, like, relationship with these if this turns out to be a story about a hive mind in, like, a Japanese, like, in the Japanese mountains, I'm gonna be really surprised if that's the direction we're going in.
確かにそれだと伝説をうまく説明できるな。じゃあお社様ってのはひょっとして異国から来た医者？
そうだね。正確には正しくないけど、そう、医者と呼べる存在。それが降臨して伝染病を治療したの。でもそれは治療ではなく対処療法でしかなかった。
All this treatment could do was reduce the symptoms of the infection. Villagers could have their symptoms suppressed, but there was no way to kill the parasites that had infested them. After a while, the village was divided into two groups. One group was made up of people who were already infected, and the others consisted of the people who weren't. Without a cure for the disease, the uninfected looked down on the people who could only suppress their violent symptoms. They even talked about drowning them in the swamp. But they knew killing the infected people wouldn't solve the problem. The parasites came out of their water source, including Onigashiki swamp. They couldn't fill them all in, for if they did that, they would lose access to their drinking water. They could have chosen to leave the village, but that was hard for them, for that was the location of their ancestors' graves. Interesting. So also, like, don't leave the village so as to not infect others, I guess. Under the power of Oyashiro-sama, infected people could live without showing symptoms. So both those who were infected and those who weren't decided to live together equally and to coexist with the parasite. Oyashiro-sama was impressed by the villagers' decision, and he decided to stay there and continue to treat them.
それがお社様がこの地にとどまり、人と鬼の生活を見守ったの真相か。
うん。そしてお社様は感染者である村人たちに症状を出さないために掟を作った。 その最大にして唯一のものが村から出てはいけない、外から人を入れてはいけないだったの。
外から人を入れてはいけないってのはわかるぜ。感染者を増やさないためだろ。でも出てはいけないってのはどういう意味なんだ？
寄生虫たちは気候や風土の関係でこのひなみ沢の地でしか生けられないらしいの。だから宿主である感染者がこの地を離れようとすると強い症状を出してそれを妨害するの。その妨害こそがいわゆるお社様のたたりの正体。
Huh. So, people in this village in the ancient past got infected with a disease. A foreign doctor came to this village. He was known as Oyashiro-sama. The dude then proceeded to kind of attempt to suppress the symptoms that these villagers had. And they decided to stay in the village, and that's when we got the religious teachings, right? Of like, don't leave the village, only stay in here, blah, blah, blah. And now we're kind of learning that the parasite can only live in Hinamizawa because of the climate. Which, like, is it due to the altitude? Is it due to the, like, because I'm trying to think, like, what's so unique about Hinamizawa compared to, say, another rural, like, village somewhere else? I don't get it. At least yet, but I assume that's going to be explained later. Anyway, but these are things to be thinking about. Just in general. The strongest symptoms of the infectious disease were violence and delirium. The infected people acted just like ogres, and the impact of seeing them in the throes of the disease was strong enough to make others describe them as such. They couldn't even let people leave who had just come to the village. If they had left after being infected, they might go crazy in a faraway land, turn into a vicious ogre, and cause a disaster. Infected people were never allowed to leave. When an infected person left the village, they brought him back by any means necessary. That was what it really meant to be Onikakushi, or Demon the Way.
ちょっと待てよ、レナ。だとしたら、俺やレナも村人はみんなその病気に感染してることになるよな。でも俺たちはひなみ沢を離れたって別に何の問題もないぞ。実際村人にも結婚したりして遠方に住んでる人も少なくないらしいじゃないか。ひなみ沢をちょっと離れたからって錯乱して鬼と化したなんて聞いたことないぞ。
Actually, one second. Okay.
そう。それはまさにお社様の目論見通りにことが進んだからなんだよ。意味がわかるかな。この村を長い間封印してきたのは寄生虫の害を弱めるためなの。
Hosts are very important for parasites. If something happens to the host, the parasite that lives in the host have to share the same fate. In other words, if the host went crazy and attacked people, the host would be captured and killed, which means that the parasites would die with the host too.
そうか。自然淘汰か。
さすが圭一君。そう。この地で長く生活を重ね、厳しい戒律で生活を続けた結果、寄生虫に対し過敏な人間は錯乱して結局殺された。また感染者を錯乱させてしまうような強すぎる寄生虫はこれもまた錯乱した宿主と共に殺された。
Right, and because they were killed, they couldn't pass off their offspring, which resulted in their genes dying, so only the passive parasites remained.
その結果寄生虫と人間は互いに相性がいい種だけが残っていった。これこそがお社様の伝説が伝える鬼と人の血は混じり合ったことの真相。
Right.
じゃあつまりその寄生虫はほとんど無害なわけなのか。
うん。ミオさんのスクラップ帳によると、そういった無害な寄生虫に感染しているケースというのはかなり多いんだって。食文化にもよるけど、例えば生肉を食べる国では国民の8割くらいが感染している例もあるんだって。でも共生できてて人体に全く無害だから 誰も治療しない、気づかない。だから撲滅もされない。
なるほどな。
太古の綿流しはね、実は腹綿流しと書く物騒なものでね、錯乱した犠牲者の臓腑を食らうものだったの。でもこれも必要なことだった。
感染して犠牲になった人を食らう。まさかワクチンとか？
圭一君はやっぱり頭がいいね。
Huh. Hold on. It said that people back then used to eat the guts of infected people who went crazy. Okay, so yes, then that would be a vaccine. They would quote-unquote inject themselves or have a little bit of the virus within them, so that they could develop an immunity to it, I assume. Is what they're trying to get at with that analogy.
ミオさんもそう読み解いてる。伝説では犠牲者を生きたまま解体して食らったなんて物騒なことになっているけど、実際はそんな野蛮なものじゃなくて、もっともっと医学的に取り扱われていたらしいの。強すぎる寄生虫のせいで死んだ犠牲者からワクチンを作り出し、同時に村人の抵抗力も高めていった。
お社様ってのは何者なんだよ一体。医学先進国っていうとドイツか？正体はひょっとしてナンパして流れ着いた外国人医師？
I love that that's at least always a good stereotype for Germans. Anytime they're like, he must be a foreigner from a very like advanced country. Was he German? Like that's so great.
多分、圭一君の答えが一番一般的だと思う。
Although, assuming like this happened, in the past, it was probably the Dutch. Unfortunately, because the Dutch are the ones that made. It was the Dutch and the Portuguese that made contact with Japan, if I'm remembering correctly. I need to brush up on my history a little bit because it's been a while, but I'm pretty sure it was the Dutch and Portuguese who made contact with Japan specifically ages ago. And they were trade partners for quite a good while, and then that's when the rest of Europe and America eventually got involved with trading with Japan.
ドイツ人ではないんだけど、とりあえず医者的な存在であったのは正解。
Immediately shoots him down. He wasn't German, but he was a doctor.
古代の伝説の秘密が明かされていくってのはなんだか面白いな。
I don't think that Rena's story is too crazy to be true anymore. It still sounds crazy, of course, but I've never heard of any theories that explain the legend of this village better than this one.
多分俺も感染してるんだよな。なんだか体中が痒くなってくるぜ。
Yeah, don't you feel itchy? Don't you feel like your blood rushing through your veins at the moment? The possibility that a parasite could be looming within your blood cells, masquerading amongst them, and just crawling through your veins.
人間だって一つの宇宙だよ。体の中には無数の細菌たちが住んでいる。その中には私たちの生活には欠かせない有用な細菌たちも少なくないんだよ。
ああ、よくヨーグルトとかの CM で言ってるよな。確かにそうだ。
これもミオさんの受け売りだけど、例えばシロアリっているでしょ。木材を食い荒らしてしまうアリ。実はシロアリって木材を消化できないんだって。体内に寄生している特殊な細菌が食べた木材の繊維を分解してくれて、その結果シロアリは木材を吸収できるんだって。これも寄生虫と共生している一例だね。
Didn't know that. When I hear the word parasites, I feel creeped out, almost instinctively. But now I know some of them aren't so bad to us.
だから太古の昔に鬼ヶ淵村から突如発生した奇怪な伝染病は今ではほぼ根絶されたと言っていい。根絶じゃないね。無害になったと言うべきだね。
最初はとんでもない話だと思ってたけどさ、こうして種明かしがされるとなんだかサイエンスな感じがしてちょっと面白い話だよな。
私たちには面白いよ。でもお社様を神として崇める人たちにとっては これはとても不愉快な説。
Of course. If Takano-san's theory is correct, Oyashiro-sama isn't a god. And the punishment by that god, namely the curse of Oyashiro-sama that people have been so afraid of, will turn out to have just been the symptoms of an infectious disease. I see. That's what dethroning God would mean. Right. So if any of this information got out, that hey, by the way, the god you've been worshipping doesn't exist, you're all infected by a parasite, if you leave your village, you will definitely, unfortunately, have a sort of mental breakdown which will turn you into like a killer beast. It would make people kind of go crazy. Because again, like, we have a lot of very religious people in this village. Half of the villagers won't care, but the other half, the elderly, definitely would. They would be like, there's no way Oyashiro-sama isn't real, I pray to him all the time, so on and so forth. If you were to tell them any of this, people would definitely become very skeptical. They would some would have mental breakdowns. It would not go well. And that would also mean that those in power who are controlling the village, uniting them under one banner by having them do things under the guise or for the reason of pleasing Oyashiro-sama, because it's his will that they want this person dead, or so on and so forth. That power would be gone. And those people, the three families, for example, and mainly the Sonozaki family, would be unable to just have any sort of control over these individuals. Which is, well, quite interesting. But anyway.
だとすると、もしこの伝染病の病原体を特定して世間に発表されるようなことがあれば、信仰は破綻しちまうな。
そう。それこそが彼らの一番恐れることなの。そしてミオさんはその病原体を特定しようとしていたらしい。そのミオさんが消されたということは。
特定できたってことが。
かもしれないね。ミオさんはもういないし、彼女のスクラップ帳にも特定できたとは書かれていない。でも消されるに値する理由が他に思いつかないの。
でもよ、20世紀ももうすぐ終わろうっていう現代だぜ。村人だっていろんな医療機関で検査を受けてきたはずだ。なのにそういう怪しげな寄生虫が摘出されたって話はないんだろう。うん、
確かに病原体そのものは未だ発見されていない。でも確かに何かの規制を受けていることの信号だけは確認されているんだって。
So before I forget, this would explain why Keiichi dies in some of the other scenarios. At the end of some of the chapters, or at least one of them, at the end of, I believe it was chapter 2, not Watanagashi, Tatari Goroshi, where, you know, he's the only one that survives the Great Hinamizawa disaster, and he ends up in some hospital at the end. It would definitely explain why he dies eventually. It could be that he was away from the village for so long, or away from the climate that kept the parasite at bay, that he just, I don't know, he clawed at his own throat, or he ends up killing himself, or something happens. Because he doesn't know any of this information in that timeline as far as we know, assuming there are timelines. Now, one other thing that I joked about as one of my original theories. Actually, let me see if I can find it. Give me 1 second, because I wrote it down a while ago. Give me 1 sec. It was my theories for like chapter 1. Here it is. Here we go. So one of my original theories, and this is one of the ones that I said as a joke, was the Sonozaki family is producing psychoactive drugs, possibly making zombies, or they're trying to scare other families into leaving town. So it's no longer that they're trying to scare other families into leaving town, but they're definitely trying to make zombies. And by zombies, at the time, I meant like literally people that would like claw at their own throats and then come back from the dead or something. But I guess what I meant now is more metaphorical zombies, as in people literally just willing to obey mindlessly, which is pretty funny. It's definitely quite the theory that I was not expecting to maybe be true.
なんだって？本当かよ。
When a parasite enters the human body, that body's immune system cells, eosinophils, eosinophils, probably, and macrophages try to kill the parasite. They secrete an antibody called immunoglobulin E, or IgE. The most common way of checking if a person is infected by a pathogen is to look at the levels of the secretion. According to Takano's research, people from Hinamizawa have a very high level of IgE in their blood. That's not all. They also have obvious symptoms of being infected by parasites. They don't have any allergies. IgE stimulates mast cells, and they secrete histamines and serotonin as a result. These cause an allergic reaction. That allergic reaction isn't pleasant for humans, but it is necessary for the body to kill the pathogen. But the parasites don't want to be killed, of course, so they secrete substances to counter that IgE. As a result, IgE stops stimulating the receptors of the mast cells, which stop secreting the chemical compounds. As a result, the antigen-antibody reaction, namely the allergic reaction, doesn't occur. In other words, a human body that was infected by a parasite secretes a high level of IgE, but doesn't display allergic reactions. For your information, a human body that's infected by a parasite doesn't suffer from hay fever. You get hay fever due to your body secreting a large amount of IgE because it's mistaken pollen for a parasitic invasion. As a result, a large amount of stimulants, like histamine, will be secreted, but your body can't contain the parasite that it's attempting to kill. That's why your body continues to secrete IgE. As a result, the stimulants keep causing allergic reactions. That's how hay fever works. If you have a parasite in your body, it'll deactivate your IgE and suppress the secretion of stimulants. As a result, you don't have an allergic reaction. In other words, there's no hay fever in Hinamizawa, and you can cure your hay fever by moving here. Cure it, quote unquote.
その存在だけは疑いようがないってわけだ。
そうなるね。
だとすると、そのスクラップ帳は狂信的な連中にとっては十分危険な存在だな。たとえ特定できなくても、存在を証明している時点で十分に危険だと思うぞ。
そうだね。たとえ証拠にはならなくても、彼らにとってはミオさんを葬るに値する危険性があったと思う。
確かに恐ろしい秘密だな。ちゃんと説明してもらえば理解できることだが、いきなり聞いたら刺激が強すぎる話だぜ。
でしょ？だから私も最初は信じられなかったし、圭一君に話しても信じてもらえないと思った。
で、大事なのはその事実を隠蔽しようと暗躍してるヤバい連中がいるって方なんだよな。
そう。今大事なのはそっちの方。
The fanatics who want to revive the sanctity of the god they worship. Reviving the majesty of their god means reviving the power of that god. And the power of their god is the infectious disease. This infectious disease can't spread nationwide, unlike other infectious diseases. So from now on, I'm going to start calling them endemic disease. We're calling it an endemic disease. That fits better, since it only affects this region. Okay. So, man. Yeah, so, like, that's the whole thing. So, the Sonozaki family wants to revive this virus, or at least the killer aspect of it, to kind of enforce people to quote-unquote believe in Oyashiro-sama again. And I'm trying to think about that, like, remember, Shion was able to live away from Hinamizawa for a very long time because she was sent to just some, you know, private school. As far as we know, she didn't act out. As far as we know, maybe the, like, the time the parasite remains dormant was, like, from, you know, how old was she? She was, like, 6 or 7 or something before she was sent to, like, that boarding school. So, let's say it's 10 years. Like, that's the usual time it takes for it to kind of, like, reactivate if you're no longer in Hinamizawa. Because once she kind of came back, she kind of started acting a little bit weird, and she started being a little bit delusional, and so on and so forth. Anyway. The endemic disease of current-day Hinamizawa is different from the one in old times. It's been through a process of natural selection, and it's harmless now. So might they be killing off those who do not show this like psychopathic behavior or these violent tendencies? In other words, it doesn't do any harm to human bodies. That harm was once interpreted as a curse. A curse is the power of a god, so a harmless endemic disease means that the god is powerless. That means the only way to regain the majesty of that god is to revive the curse. In other words, they want to bring back the primitive endemic disease, namely the harmful, strong version of the parasite.
ちょっと待てよ。信者たちは神が実は寄生虫だったなんてことは否定したいんだろう。なのに寄生虫を研究するのかよ。矛盾してないか。
Yeah, you have to remember, Keiichi. The fanatics are like the old people. The old people are the fanatics that are obsessed with believing that Oyashiro-sama exists. Then you have those in power who know it's a parasite and want that power to... they want to keep that power, and the way to do so is to, you know, fuck with people by actually reinfecting them.
矛盾しているよ。だからこの研究は信者たちのトップだけが知る秘密の研究なんだと思う。
Exactly. Now, mind you, she said head of the fanatics. She did not say Sonozaki family.
彼らは表向きは信仰を盛り上げているけど、その裏では信仰の正体について極めて冷静に理解していて、神の技を自らの手で復活させようとしている。
なるほどな。おいおい、なんだかとんでもない話になってきたぞ。
ミオさんのスクラップ帳にはそうとは一言も書かれてないんだけど、私、
慰霊診療所がどうして？
ひなみ沢の規模から見て施設が立派すぎるのがその理由。そしてミオさんはそこに勤めていた。監督は園崎家にスカウトされてきた細菌学者が正体とか。
監督がか？
ミオさんは余計なことを知りすぎたから消されたんだと思うの。なのに監督が消されない理由は、監督は信者たちに依頼されている立場だから。
そして太古の有害な風土病を研究してるってのか。あの監督が。
ごめん、監督は無関係かもしれないね。今のは私の思いつき。でも研究は間違いなくどこかで誰かにさせている。そしてその研究には5年かかり、ついに完成を見た。
The first case was the dismemberment murder by the dam construction workers. Their quarrel had turned into a lynching. They might have had the primitive infectious disease, and the symptoms, the aggression and delirium might have kicked in. The victims of the second year were Satoko's parents. They were no witnesses, so the whole event is veiled in mystery. But there's a theory that someone might have pushed them over the cliff, since the fence of the observation deck that they fell from was quite sturdy. I could have sworn it was the other way. Didn't they say that the fence was like kind of weak? Anyway, what if one of them was infected by the primitive parasite? He or she might have become violent and pushed the other over the cliff. The Shinto priest died from a disease, and his wife drowned herself in the third year. He might have died of shock because of a hypersensitive reaction to the infection. His wife might have gone crazy and committed suicide when one of the symptoms, delirium, kicked in. In the fourth year, Satoshi Hojo's aunt was beaten to death, probably by Satoshi himself. Everybody who knew Satoshi remembers how he changed at that time. He showed signs of being both aggressive and delirious, right? He was getting less sleep. When he defended his sister, he shoved, like, Mion, the real Mion, into a locker and almost, like, beat the shit out of her. But he somehow, like, restrained himself. And the fifth year. For the first time in 5 years, the victim experienced the maggot disease, described in the old scrolls of the Furude Shrine. The reason behind that is unclear, but the stronger primitive parasite could have given its victims a delusion of maggots. This means that they finally managed to duplicate the curse of Oyashiro-sama after 5 years of research. Interesting. Tomitake is the victim of the 5th year. He died in an extremely abnormal way, and I'm the only one who understands his death because I experienced the same thing. He kept clawing at his throat to get rid of the maggots and died as a result. With all that explained, I finally understand the maggot disease I experienced in Ibaraki. I left Hinamizawa, and it made the parasite in me uncomfortable. As a result, I tried to resist, even though it wasn't very strong, and it tried to make me homesick. But with my parents' divorce, I grew mentally unbalanced and I completely lost the power to resist for a period of time. The parasite was weak and harmless, but my mental instability allowed it to worsen my symptoms drastically. As a result, I went crazy and became violent. The delusion of Oyashiro-sama appeared to me in the bathroom. The delusion of Oyashiro-sama appearing to me in the bathroom was probably the terminal phase of my delirium. Right. I created the supernatural existence, Oyashiro-sama, that I was instilled with when I was little. Then I persuaded myself to go back to Hinamizawa based on that delusion. Some of the transcendents of Onigashiki must have had the same kind of experience. They must have passed their experiences down as the acts of a god. I remember I once saw on TV that the indigenous people in South America used some kind of natural drug in order to have a mystical experience, and that they called it a ritual to communicate with their gods.
じゃあ信者どもの目的はその太古の寄生虫をひなみ沢中にばらまくことなのか？
多分それが最終目的だと思う。でも人知れずにそれをやることはないと思うの。宗教にはセレモニーが必要だから。だからもし彼らが望むものを生み出せてそれをばらまく日が訪れたなら、彼らは多分それをお社様の復活の人でも称して宗教的なデモンストレーションをすると思うの。何か特別な儀式とか、とにかくお社様の復活を祝い知らしめるような盛大な何か。
なあ、それってよ、悪いことなんだよな。
That'd be pretty bad, wouldn't it? If all of a sudden they start reviving Oyashiro-sama? That'd be pretty terrible, right, Rena?
危険性の高い病原体をばらまこうというんだから、多分悪いことに分類されるだろうね。
それって細菌テロって言わないか？おい、めちゃくちゃヤバいことだぞ。おい、富武さんの死に方がお社様のたたりの再現に成功していた以上、 X デーは間近ってことなんじゃないのか？
わからない。もう秒読みなのか、まだまだ時間のかかることなのか。
もうこれはレナ一人が抱えていい問題じゃないぞ。かなり笑えない大陰謀だぞ。俺たちにはどうしようもない。警察に任す方がないぞ。
私が話したこと、警察は信じてくれると思う？
信じるかどうかは向こうが判断するだろう。とにかく話した方がいい。
圭一君、それを大石さんに私が打ち明けたら、私がスクラップ帳を持っていることを告白するのと同じなんじゃないかな。
それってまずいのか？
大石さんの接触はミオさんが殺された後だった。敵はミオさんを殺した時点でスクラップ帳の紛失と、その数日前に私が図書館で出会っていることを知っている。
バカな。つまり
そう、大石さん自体が敵の手先である可能性がある。
What? Oishi might be one of them.
大石さんは私がスクラップ帳を持っている可能性があると当たりをつけていて、探りを入れてきているのかもしれない。実際彼はうさんくさくて腹を割らない。園崎家を疑わせるようなことを言って自分は味方だと言ってくるけど、彼だってその園崎家の手先かもしれない。
I also just realized there are currently, or there were, 2 scrapbooks in circulation. We have the one that was given to Mion back in chapter 2, or the one that we read about in the last chapter, in chapter 5, where Mion, who was Shion at the time, met with Takano in the library, was given her scrapbook, and then she took her own notes or something along those lines. I don't remember if she gave it back to Takano or to Takano. I think she did at one point, but Mion knows about this, And Mion knew that Takano knows about this. Now, as far as we know, Mion hadn't swapped places with Shion. Okay, or to change the wording, the older sister had not swapped places with the younger sister living in Hinamizawa yet. It was currently the younger sister, quote unquote. No, that still doesn't make sense. I'll just stick to like their actual names. The one who was sent to boarding school was Mion, the original Mion. The one who stayed back is Shion. Mion had not swapped places with Shion back in Hinamizawa yet, and Shion was still basically acting out, or was still being the head of the household, right? She's the one that got the tattoo and everything. So she didn't know that Takano had these books. And it probably wasn't until the 5th year that someone found out in some way, shape, or form, and they tried to get her killed. But anyway. My main point is that we also know that Rena has these books. So if there are 2 different types of notes in circulation, then that's great. Otherwise, the notes that Mion read were not the most up-to-date, which makes sense. I mean, it was still being researched, quote-unquote.
圭一君、4年目の撲殺事件を知ってるよね。さとこちゃんのおばさんが殺された事件。あれは犯人はサトシ君以外に考えられないんだけど、その後犯人は麻薬中毒者だったということになった。これをどう思う？
警察内部に狂信的な連中の手先が混じっていて、犯人を捏造したってことか。
3年目の神主さんの病死の検視とか、2年目の北条夫妻の事故現場の見聞とか。
Also, the audio kind of swapping back and forth is a little bit weird. Like Keiichi sounded clear instead of sounding like he was in a filter, like from on the other side of a phone. But anyway.
警察がもしも彼らの片棒を担いでいるなら、数々の完全犯罪が可能になる。ひなみ沢御三家はダム戦争時から今日に至るまでも。ずっと警察への圧力を維持してるんだよ。それに沖宮の町のいろんなところに一族が進出して実権を握っているというのはみーちゃんから聞かされたことがあるんじゃない？
Right, I was about to mention this as well. And I think it was revealed in one of the past chapters that there's a mole for the Sonozaki family within the police department. So that makes sense.
確かにそれはミオンの口からだけじゃない。いろんなやつの口から聞かされた。ミオンの園崎家がどれだけ市内全域に強力な影響力を持っているかってのをな。
そういうこと。警察はこの土地では必ずしも信用できない。
なあレナ、すまん。先にはっきりさせたいんだが、黒幕は園崎家なのか？ミオンも関係があるってのか？それだけは先に聞かせてくれ。
御三家であるみーちゃんやリカちゃんが直接関係しているかはわからない。ただ狂信的な勢力が御三家や一番の有力家である園崎家を自由に動かせる中枢部に根付いているのは間違いない。狂信的な勢力が根付いたのか、御三家の中枢が狂信的なのかは分かりかねるけどね。
関係あるかどうかわからない以上、用心に越したことはないってわけだな。
うん。みーちゃんたちのことを疑うわけじゃないよ。普段のみーちゃんは頼もしいし、私も他の心配事なら打ち明けて助力を求めることもあると思う。ただ今回のことはちょっと話の次元が違う。圭一君は見たことあるかな？みーちゃんは普段はふざけているけど、園崎家の次期当主として振る舞うときはものすごく冷酷で別人みたいに振る舞えるの。それにもし無関係だったとしても、それならばやはり耳に入れることで危険に巻き込むことにもなるんじゃないかな。
ミオンたちが味方になってくれればかなり頼もしいぞ。俺は打ち明ける価値があると思うんだが。
だからそれはダメ。
Although, do remember, assuming everything is the same as assuming the events of chapter 2 also happened in chapter 1 around the same time, that would mean that Mion actually swapped places with Shion, and after the Watanagashi, or actually a bit before the Watanagashi, like literally like the night before, or was it the night of? Anyway, during the like around the time of the Watanagashi, Mion kidnapped Shion and shoved her in the like dungeon underneath the house, underneath the main house. Meaning that if we were to talk to Mion right now, we'd be talking to whom they know as Shion. And I'm pretty sure she would be on board and trying to like help them out like regarding this, but they don't know this. This is part of the dramatic irony that this visual novel just has. Now, again, this is assuming that the events stayed the same. Assuming Shion is because they haven't mentioned Shion in a while. She stopped showing up. Assuming Shion did swap places with Mion, and now Mion is Mion and Shion is Shion. Shion being in the cage, Mion not being in a cage. Then she would definitely help because she wants to find out like who did this to Satoshi. And if she were to find out that all the shit's going on, she'd be fucking pissed. She would also probably kind of come to the conclusion that shit, like my outbursts were all literally caused by a parasite. My delirious outbursts were all caused by a parasite.
味方にできれば確かに心強いけど、そうでなかった時はどうするつもり？
じゃあ、俺とレナだけでどう戦うつもりなんだよ。
もともと最初から絶望的な戦いなんだよ。だから圭一君を巻き込みたくなかった。
Right.
くそ、高野さんめ、とんでもない置き土産を残してくれたな。
Because here's the thing, right? Like, Keiichi should be fine for the most part. They don't know that he knows any of this. But Keiichi is Keiichi, and he's gonna flip the fuck out. He's gonna have his little mental breakdown. And he's gonna, like, spill the beans at some point.
でもそのおかげで、とてつもない陰謀を知ることができたんだよ。これは、ミオさんの遺言なんだよ、きっと。
村を影から牛耳る何者かに、その村に住まうガキンチョ2人が挑むわけだ。こいつは最高にハードな話だぜ。一筋縄じゃいかねえぞ。
でも圭一君が味方でよかったよ。2人だから話し合えて相談できる。
当たり前だろ。俺は最初からずっとレナの味方で仲間だぞ。
ありがとう。2人なら心強いよ。
一人で悩むよりは建設的になれるだろうしな。
そうだね。2人でどう戦えばいいか、これからじっくり相談していこう。今日は私、スクラップ帳を読み直す時間が欲しかったから休んだけど、明日からは普段通りに生活するね。おかしな行動をすれば、気取られてしまうかもしれないからね。圭一君も変に構えないで普段通りに生活してね。みーちゃんとか、時折鋭いことがあるから特に気をつけて。
Well, this is where Rena is wrong. Because as we know, the Mion that they think is Mion is actually very aloof. The Mion that we know as Shion, that is. Who is technically the younger sister. So, that Mion is very aloof. She is not very perceptive. But her sister Shion, whom we know as Mion, is. So if Irena has come to this conclusion, that means that Shion is, or in this case Mion, is actually Mion. Meanwhile, Shion is currently in a cage underneath, like, you know, the main house or something. And that's currently what's going on. So that means that we do have Mion in the picture at the moment.
わかった。何事もなかったかのように生活するよ。だが畜生、なんだか怖いぜ。とんでもない陰謀が間近に迫ってて、それがもうカウントダウンに入ってるかもしれないってんだぜ。それを知りつつ、普段通りに生活しろってのも辛い話だよな。
多分そんなにすぐじゃないはずなの。さっきも言った通り、彼らが狂信的であればあるほど 宗教的そういうセレモニーは村を挙げて行うものだもの。綿流し以上のイベントは今のひなみ沢には存在しない。
ということは、少なくとも来年の綿流しまでは大丈夫ということか。
Whoa, 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 what the fuck do you mean? We have until the next
根拠の
Watanagashi.
ない読みだけどね。
What? What do you mean? Until the next Watanagashi? This is the first time we've had a game or a chapter go this long. The Watanagashi already happened. Normally a day or two after, Rika is killed. And then that leads to the whole, just everything else, you know, coming, like, it crumbles down. I need to try to, like, remember what happened at the end of Onikakshi with the note and some other stuff that happened. Because if you recall, at the end of Onikakshi, the first chapter, Keiichi gets restrained by Rena and by Mion. And they want to inject him. So he leaves a note. He leaves the syringe behind, like, his clock or something. And when the police check his room, they find that note behind his clock, but the section they find that it's the note has been torn, like the bottom half of the note is missing, which is what held the syringe in place. So, assuming instead of it being an untraceable drug, what if the people are being infected by the original pathogen or by the original parasite? And that's what causes them to spaz out as it infiltrates their body, and then it causes them to just quote-unquote commit suicide. That's more than likely what's going on. Now, to an extent, I am a little more likely to believe this being a theory. This might be kind of stupid on my behalf, but if you didn't know, back when COVID started, way back then, a few years ago, GOG, Good Old Games, was doing a promotion with Ryukishi 07, the guy, you know, the studio and the guy that worked on, sorry, the guy that worked on this. 07 Studios are the people that worked on it, if I recall. Or Circle, as they were known before. Anyway, they were working with GOG, and they were like, hey, we're gonna make the first chapter of Onikakshi, the first chapter of Watanagashi, of Higurashi, which is Onikakshi. We're gonna make it free for as long as COVID is a thing. And I thought to myself, well, that's pretty nice of him. Why would he do that? If this does turns out to be a fucking story about just parasitic invasions, or just parasites in general, that's like the main thing for Higurashi, then that makes too much sense. That would make a lot of sense. But anyway.
他に綿流し以上のイベントが思いつかない。
I think we have a year at least, but I also feel like we don't because of how they killed Mio. I might not know, but there might be a bigger religious event than Watanagashi. It might not be long until that day. On the day of Oyashiro-sama's revival, they're going to spread a dangerous parasite, and that day might be just around the corner.
Reina, まだ電話してるのか? そろそろ終わりにしなさい.
My father stuck his head out from the living room telling me I need to hang up soon. I thought about telling him so many times. It's natural to think that your parents will be on your side no matter what. But I know just how weak he can get, so I couldn't tell him. I don't think he'd believe me anyway. Even if I told him, he'd just tell me to call the police. It's better that I don't tell him. They might get close to my father to get to me. If he didn't know anything about anything, including the scrapbooks, there'd be nothing to squeeze out of him to begin with.
ごめんね、ケイチ君。今夜はもう遅いから。これで切るね。また明日学校で。
おう、また明日学校で。
用心してね。圭一君ももう部外者じゃないんだから。
おう、せいぜい気をつけるぜ。
I remembered the suspicious man in the white van and felt a chill run through my spine. They looked like villagers, but they weren't. They had the village accent, but they were just pretending. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious they became. It let me know that Rena and I aren't safe. If Rena is right, they're just suspicious of her, and they're not sure if she has the scrapbooks or not. But it's still creepy. Rena had probably experienced the same creepiness I felt when I saw the van several times up until now. She must sense the dangers more than I do, or the danger more than I do. However, the fact that they weren't attacking, that they were merely observing us, was disturbing. If they attacked her, she could have done something like going to the police. But all they're doing is just watching her from a distance. She can't do anything about it. She can't talk to anybody about it. She probably just wants to stay in her house all day. But if she acted different, they might take it as proof that she has the scrapbooks. We have to think about how to fight against them, without making it obvious. I told myself that there was no going back, and I put the phone down. Oh boy. Now, is this the chapter end, or... it's the midway point? Oh boy. Keiichi wakes up in the fucking hospital room. The next day, Rena came to school acting normal like she said she would. She talked with Mion as cheerfully as she always did, and it made me wonder if the story she told me last night was a complete fabrication. That's because the story really was too ridiculously crazy to believe. This village has a very weird and rare endemic disease, and there are religious fanatics who want to use the disease to revive their weird cult. And they've been researching the pathogen of the endemic disease so they can spread it throughout the village. I was deeply influenced by Rena last night, and I believed everything she said. But thinking about it with a cool mind under the bright sunlight, it sounds too crazy to be true. The story Rena told me is based on Takano's crazy hand-me-down ideas. It's based entirely on her theories, which, though very feasible, have no evidence whatsoever. The fact that Takano was murdered lends credit to the story, I'll give you that, but... I looked at Mion. She was fooling around with Rena. It's hard to believe that she's involved with some crazy conspiracy. Wait a minute, what the fuck is this? Why are there birds chirping? This is the first time we've heard birds chirp. We usually hear Higurashi or cicadas, but for some reason we're getting birds. Okay.
っていうか聞いてないでしょケイちゃん。
悪い。ごめん、聞いてなかった。
Does she like zoom in? No.
まだ寝ぼけたまんまなのかな。寝不足だとおつむもちゃんと働かないよ。
True. Mion made fun of me for reacting too slowly. It's almost impossible not to trust this bubbly, cheerful girl. I trust Mion. I trust my friends. I know she'd never have a hand in crazy conspiracy like that. If she knew about it, she wouldn't be able to act this cheerfully. And Rena told me not to tell Mion because she might be one of them. But it might be worth telling her without letting Rena know. Of course, there's at least a 1% chance that the conspiracy is true and that Mion is one of them. If so, I'd be doomed. But if I had to choose between believing that the crazy conspiracy theory and trusting my friends, my answer would be obvious. I know that my friend Mion isn't a part of any conspiracy. She'd never be involved with something like that. Even if the conspiracy exists, I'm sure Mion will be on our side. So, whether or not it's true, it must be worth telling Mion about it. Hold on. It kind of just hit me that Keiichi's about to fuck everything up. Keiichi, you daft motherfucker, what are you doing? Like, mind you, we know this is not Mion. Or sorry, we know that this is not the Mion they know. But holy fuck. Even if the conspiracy exists, I'm sure Mion will be on our side. So whether or not it's true, it must be worth telling Mion about it.
こんなところに呼び出して。 それも誰にも内緒で来いなんてさ。まさかカツアゲとかそういうのじゃないよね。
I'm gonna confess to you, Mion.
お前な、体育倉庫の裏に呼ばれたら真っ先にそう思うのかよ。
じゃあラブレターとか。
True?
でもそういうのは下駄箱が定番じゃない？
都会じゃそうでもないぞ。直接渡す白兵線型も少なくない。
Oh? Shocked. Is it true? Do you really have a love letter for me, Keiji?
じゃあ
なわけねえだろ。それよりかなり真面目な話がある。茶化しは一切なしで聞いてくれ。
何よ。
Oh boy.
どうしたの？
Keiichi, why?
お社様信仰を復活させようとしている連中がいるってのは知ってるか？
は？何、ケイちゃん。何の話？
This, of course, was just my way of getting a feel for the situation. I wanted to see how she was going to react by getting straight to the point. But Mion really did look puzzled. People wouldn't normally react like this if someone pointed out their secrets out of the blue. And also, hey, try winning. Thanks for stopping by. No, this is not a hentai game. This is a murder mystery visual novel that involves a quaint town in a little mountain village, where every single year someone ends up being killed and someone ends up disappearing. And as for what that mystery is or what causes all of this, well, you know, you kind of have to play to find out. But this is just like the original art style, which, you know, is pretty charming. You get used to it. There is a console art style, which looks like this, where the hands are no longer giant. But anyway. They always panic, even if only just a little. Either Mion was a brilliant actress, or she really didn't have anything to do with the idea of reviving Oyashiro-sama. I decided to tell her everything.
ミオ、お前の家の園崎家ってひなみ沢を含めものすごい影響力を持ってるわけだけどさ。
So I will say, if you are interested in like that premise that I just described, I would definitely recommend clicking away and either playing the game yourself, which is very affordable, or just checking out the other chapters, because we're currently on the 6th chapter of the 8 or so chapters in this game, and they're all up on YouTube if you're interested. But I would definitely recommend checking them out, because we're getting to the part in the game where all these like questions get answered.
お社様信仰を復興するため何か暗躍してるってことはあるか？
こう？なんで？
いや、だからさ、今のお社様信仰って大昔の時代に比べたらだいぶ信仰心が薄くなってるだろ。それをさ、大昔の鬼ヶ淵村のレベルまで引き戻したいと思っている、いわゆる原理主義者的な連中が暗躍をしてるんじゃないかって。
はい？ちょっと何の話なわけ？
本当に何の話かわからないのか？
わかるわけないよ。何その全米第1位みたいな面白ストーリーはさ。
Mion's reaction was very natural. It seemed impossible that she was pretending she didn't know anything about it. But regardless, I continued.
いや、だからそういう連中がこの村にいるらしいんだよ。ミオンは知らないか？
お社様信仰を鬼ヶ淵村の時代のレベルに？そんなことして何かいいことあるの？
いや、そりゃ信仰の厚い狂信的な連中にとってはとても重要な意味があるんじゃないかな。
だってケイちゃん、大昔の厳しい戒律の頃に逆戻りって誰も喜ばないよ。今のこの現代、村から出るななんて言われたら生活なんかやってられないって。
例えばほら、リカちゃんって何でもお社様の生まれ変わりとか言ってちやほやされてるらしいだろ。そういった取り巻きの老人たちの中にはきっと狂信的な一派が存在して。
リカちゃんの取り巻きっていうと 君吉のおじいちゃんとかのこと？まあ確かに信仰心は熱い方だと思うけど、狂信的ってのはどうかと思うね。
Or maybe in this timeline, they haven't swapped. Kimiyoshi's still alive. And he died, I believe, before the Watanagashi. No, it was right after. Was it? I'm already forgetting off the top of my head. It's been a while since we played the last chapter.
いやだからいるんだよ。本来のお社様信仰を再び復活させようとしている輩が。
はいはい。話が進まないからこの場は信じるよ。それで？
で、そいつらはお社様の正体がこの土地独特の風土病にあることを突き止め、その病原体を研究しているらしいんだ。
どこで？というか、風土病って何？病原体って何よ？縁が長。
I was getting confused. I didn't know what I was talking about myself anymore. I was deeply influenced by Irena last night and believed everything she said, but having said it all out loud, I started realizing how impossible the story sounded.
どうしたの？ミオさんに妙なことでも吹き込まれたわけ？
How smug she looks. Look at this gremlin. Anyway.
知ってるのか？
有名だよ。あの人オカルトマニアだから、いつもとんでもない空想話をでっち上げてる。たまに真に受ける人がいるとかなりヘビーに吹き込むって有名なんだよ。私も昔話を聞かせてもらったことがあったけど、結構面白かったな。
それって本当か？
ケイちゃんもどこかで耳にしてるだろうけど、この村は大昔はちょっと特殊な文化があった。それは少し刺激の強い要素のある文化でね。厳しい戒律と厳しい刑罰、残酷な風習は割とオカルトマニアの間では知られてるらしい。ミオさんもそんなマニアの中の一人。
じゃあこの村が怪しげな寄生虫に支配されているという話は？
はあ？寄生虫？それミオさんの新作？
新作ってどういうことだよ？
言ったでしょ、ミオさんはオカルトマニアなの。鬼ヶ淵村の奇怪な伝説などを研究して、あれやこれやの仮説や推理、妄想を楽しんでるわけよ。だからその寄生虫に村が支配されてるって説以外にもいろいろ創作してる。私がずいぶん前に聞いたのは UFO 説だったよ。これが結構辻褄があってて面白いの。太古の昔に鬼ヶ淵村に UFO が墜落して、そこから出てきた異星人と村人で戦いが起こってという感じから始まる B 級 SF ホラーだった。聡子が聞かされたってのは地底人説だったかな。地殻変動によって地底王国と鬼ヶ淵村の間に接点ができてしまって、それでなんだっけかな、そうそう、地底王国のお姫様と村の若者が恋をして互いに仲直りをしたっていう SF ロミオとジュリエットだった。んで最新作がどうやらケイちゃんの聞かされた寄生虫説ってわけみたいだね。いやいや、いつかそれらを全部まとめて本にしてほしいよ。
That's right, she technically doesn't know that Mio is dead. Mion began laughing so hard that she had to hold her stomach. As I looked at her laughing like that, I realized I fell for something that ridiculous. Oh boy. Keiichi, don't think that way. Because remember, for all we know, Mion, like, if we listen to this from like Mion's perspective, or we look at this interaction from Mion's perspective, if she is with Hinamizawa, and assuming that this is Shion pretending to be Mion, by that I mean she is not in the basement cage, then she's on the side, of course she's you know, on the Sonozaki family side, and she needs to get Keiichi off the scent, if that makes sense, by making sure to kind of just tell him, like, oh man, all that stuff sounds really ridiculous. You sound really stupid right now. You know, something along those lines. Oh, man. Because again, the game is very good at doing this. And I point it out every single time it happens. But it loves to lure you into this false sense of security, where you think something might be going on. Because you're given information from one source. And then you think something else might be going on once these same people, or once someone else just shows up and is like, what? You believe that? That's stupid. Or they'll throw something else at you to make you think otherwise. At that point, it was obvious. I had been completely taken in.
すまんミオ。俺がこれから聞くことに答えてくれ。まず、お社様信仰を復活させようとする連中は実在する。
しないよ。というかむしろ逆。ひなみ沢は外部に対してどんどん開いていって栄えさせていこうということで、御三家はすでに意見を統一してる。これはまだ内緒なんだけど、21世紀までをめどにね、新しい高速道路がここいらを通るという計画があるんだよ。園崎家は現在水面下でその誘致をしててね。
Yeah, but what if, say this construction goes through? What if the construction itself is not necessarily to keep people in, but they finally found the pathogen, right, for this parasite, and they're now gonna use it to infect outsiders by allowing people to come in? Maybe.
うまくいけばここいらは一気に栄えることになる。
It will flourish, won't it?
バッチャはそれによって山林の地価が一気に高騰して大儲けできると踏んでるみたいだ。まあ21世紀の仕事だから、それは私が引き継ぐ大仕事になりそうだけどね。
じゃあ外部の人間を意味嫌う連中なんてのは存在しない？
だからそんなの存在しないって。ただでさえ不便な村をさらに不便にしてどうするんだか。現に村は今別荘地として売り出しを開始してる。ケイちゃんの家はまさにその第1号じゃないの。村人はみんな歓迎してくれたでしょ。若者の流出を食い止めるため御三家もいろいろと考えてるんだから。
There was nothing vague about what Mion had said. Her story makes a lot more sense than Takano's delusional theories. And so, Mion's words woke me up from the delusion.
じゃあ、あれはどうだよ。寄生虫の感染の証拠を示す血液中のなんとかとかいう数値がひなみ沢の住民だけ異常に高いみたいな話が。
そうなの？というか、ミオさんはそんなのどうやって調べたわけ？
Well, she worked at the
だっ
clinic.
て高野さんは看護師だろ。調べる気になればいくらだって。
そんな怪しげな調査のために誰が血液採取なんかに協力するの？誰もしないって。それに仮に採血をしたってどこでどう調べたわけ？
In the
ミオ
clinic.
さんはたった一人で一体何人の血を調べられたっていうわけ？
Mion was right. I couldn't believe I thought Takano could do all that just because she was a nurse. Mind you, again, this is all still probably just a red herring. All to throw you off from the original theory. It's here to make you question everything that you've just been told. We just sat through an hour-long phone call between Rena and Keiichi, where she basically told him, hey, by the way, this whole village is infected by parasites. They all display high levels of this specific, not liquid, chemical that's released by your cells whenever they're trying to fight off a parasite. And there's a secret, like, cult trying to revive, like, the old gods. Keiichi believes her, and now he's being told the opposite. And remember, Keiichi is very impressionable, and he's always a very unreliable narrator. So, he definitely knows something. He's definitely given away that he has Takano's scrapbooks. And he's definitely going to be killed now. It struck me hard to believe that she got that many blood samples and did a high-level examination like that without any help. When I thought about it rationally, I shouldn't have believed such a ridiculous story so easily.
寄生虫の寄生の証拠として花粉症にかからないって聞いたぞ。
See, because now the way that Keiichi is talking, since he doesn't have any of the solid evidence, by that I mean he doesn't have any of the documented words or like just terms that Takano would have used. Here he just sounds like a kid talking to another kid about like rumors he's heard. Well, I heard the cops here don't get any hay fever, and because of that they can't get parasites.
花粉症って都会の病気じゃないの。あれは確か排気ガスと関係があるんでしょ。ここはひなみ沢だよ、ケイちゃん。というか、多分沖宮の人にだって花粉症なんてそうそういないと思うけど。
じゃああれは園崎本家当主直属の暗殺部隊ってのがいて、昔大臣の孫の誘拐とかをやったんだろう。
This is definitely sealing. This is the final nail on his fucking coffin. Keiichi is now public enemy number 1 of the Sonozaki family because he said this.
そんなのがいたらかっこいいね。
Internally, Mion is like, Keiichi has the scrapbooks. He is public enemy number 1. Because we know for a fact that, assuming this is Shion, the one that would normally be in a cage right now, she was at these meetings while the kidnapping was happening. She is well aware that this did occur a few years ago. Even I was sounding ridiculous, but I believed all of it last night. I believed it because Rena looked very serious.
大臣の孫が高津戸のあたりで突然発見されたのは事実。だけれど、あれは私たちじゃない。私たちじゃないけど、それを私たちはさも自分たちが犯したように振る舞ってた。
わかりにくいぞ。説明してくれ。
うん。ダム戦争の当時、鬼ヶ淵死守同盟は相当に物騒な抵抗運動をしていたのは事実。脅迫めいたこともやってのけた。でもね、あの当時それを利用するやらしい連中もいたらしいの。鬼ヶ淵死守同盟の名を語って金品を要求したりするエセ同盟って連中。
The Onigavachi Guardians were a very aggressive force at the time. There's a high possibility that some people thought they could use the name to extort money.
その中に大臣の孫の誘拐もあったの。おそらく誘拐犯たちは警察の捜査のか乱を狙って死守同盟のふりをして身代金を要求したんだと思う。正直あの事件は同盟にとっても驚きだったよ。よく大臣の孫を誘拐できたもんだって話題になったね。
I'm sure they were.
犯人たちに会えたら表彰してやろうなんて盛り上がったっけ。
ちょっと待て。じゃあ大臣の孫の誘拐は鬼ヶ淵死守同盟は何も関係ないのかよ。
うん、全くない。
Mion said it firmly. It was a simple and clear answer which left no room for suspicion. And thinking about it, it's nothing surprising. Kidnapping the grandson of a minister and negotiating with him in person is a huge deal. The Onigavachi Guardians were a very aggressive group. But this operation wasn't so easy that it could be carried out by any of the normal residents of Hinamizawa. It was obviously the work of professional criminals without a doubt.
ただね、さっきも少し言いかけたけど、
Did she zoom in? No.
園崎本家はね、この誘拐事件を自分たちが黒幕であるかのように振る舞っていた。
振る舞ったってのはどういうことだ。
これは園崎本家の秘密の家訓なの。
We haven't seen this face in quite a while either. But let's see if this one's different. I don't believe it was. No, she's not zoomed in or anything.
ケイちゃんにはこっそり話すけど、話したことは内緒だよ。園崎本家ではね、自分たちに都合がいい何かの事件が起こった時、あたかもそれが自分たちの差し金であるように振る舞うブラフの伝統があるの。
Right, so this we know is true.
ブラフってはったり？
That part we know is true. But here, Mion is kind of just mincing words and literally using, you know, she's deflecting a lot of what he said and then kind of giving him like an actual real thing. Like a real bit of information.
お天気でもいいし、宝くじの当選番号でもいい。あたかも園崎本家が望んだからそのような結果になったかのように振る舞うの。そうするとどう？なんだかものすごい黒幕ってイメージになるでしょ？つまりはそういうこと。
This is also further proof that Mion, that this isn't Mion, that this is Shion right now, and Shion isn't in the cage, because Shion doesn't tell Mion this until the end of the chapter, when the cops are kind of like ready to blow the fucking doors off, and kind of like rescue everyone, quote unquote.
これは園崎本家の当主だけに代々公伝で伝承される秘密のイメージ戦略なの。自分たちを本来よりもより強大に見せようとするイメージ戦略。
じゃあほら、ダム戦争時に建設省を占拠するって作戦があったんだろ。あれはしかもそのために武器やら訓練やら。
それも全く同じだよ、ケイちゃん。そんなバカな作戦本当にやるわけないじゃん。
Right.
最大の目的はあいつらならやりかねない。なんて恐ろしい奴らだっていう。
Okay, so before that, before we got disconnected, we learned from Mion that, you know, she's like, haha, there's no way we could actually carry out a crazy plan like that. That's just the spin that we put on things, right? That's what she wants you to quote unquote believe. So, our real goal, our real goal was to make people believe that we were capable of doing things like that, so that we could exact pressure on the government. That's all. So they obtained weapons and went through training just so they could exact pressure. They had no intention of actually carrying out the plan. The Sonozaki family was just bluffing. That made sense. Of course it did. It's impossible to attack the Ministry of Construction. Even if they did, it wouldn't solve the problem. All I had to do was use common sense. Even if they did, they would have been crushed within seconds by a huge number of policemen. Why didn't I think of that?
じゃあ武器とか訓練とかってのは？
武器に関してはノーコメントでいいよね。訓練もやったよ。はったりになるようちゃんとしっかりね。葛西さんをリーダーにお父さんとこの若い衆たちを引き連れてテキサスの砂漠でトレーナーさんと戦争ごっこをやった後はサンフランシスコでのんびり観光してた。
Yeah, so here's the thing. Keiichi doesn't know younger men from her father's office are Yakuza members. So before we had the stream crash issues at the start of the stream and we had to start all over, I kind of went on a little rant basically saying how none of this shit happened. I don't believe that they were trained by retired military members, you know, in the US. But now that Mion's technically saying it, I do have to kind of consider it as a possibility. So somehow the Japanese Yakuza had some connections to ex-members of the US military. They went to a desert in Texas. They trained with them. And then they went to San Francisco sightseeing before heading back to Japan. I believe that last part, at least. I believe that they went sightseeing in San Francisco. As for whether or not they were trained in Texas, that's still kind of up in the air. But I'm going to assume that they actually did train instead of quote-unquote play war games. Because again, remember, the Yakuza connections in the Sonozaki family come from Mion's father, not from her mother, not from the Sonozaki family itself. Because her father is not a Sonozaki. He accepted that last name, or he took on that last name when he married Mion's mother. But anyway.
じゃあ
I couldn't think of anything else. It was obvious now. No, Rena and I both were completely fooled by the scrapbooks of Takano-san's delusion. Rena was so serious about it, so I believed her, but if you examine it closely, there were so many inconsistencies. I couldn't believe Rena took a delusion like that so seriously. I knew the reason why, though. She was still in a state of shock after being caught with the corpses that day. She was mentally unstable. Then she came across this tall tale and she believed it. Rena's a smart girl. She wouldn't have taken it seriously if she was stable. Plus, another thing happened to wake me up from the delusion. The white van I saw yesterday came to school during the lunch break. The 4 men in the work uniforms I saw were there too. I said thank you to Mion and followed them. The man who talked to me yesterday knocked on the door of the teacher's office.
毎度おこのぎ造園でございますね。
どうもご苦労様です。今日も暑いですね。
いいえいえ。先生は今日もますますべっぴんで。
Oh?
ではすみません。今日もよろしくお願いいたします。
はい。よろしくお願いします。これ、うちの事務屋から渡すように言われましたんで。
見積書と請求書ですね。ありがとうございます。日付は空欄ですね。問題、はい、お預かりします。
はい。それでは取り掛かりますんで。
The man was talking to Chia Sensei with a big smile.
どうしたのかね、前原君。
あ、校長先生。今の男の人は誰ですか？
The principal pointed his finger at the window. When I looked out, I heard the noise of an engine starting. The noise was coming from the engine of a motorized lawnmower. I saw young men in work uniforms taking another lawnmower, some brooms, and a ladder out of the van.
園芸業者さんである。
Mm-hmm.
だいぶ垣根や樹木が手入れされてなかったからの。夏前に一度剪定を頼もうと思ったのだよ。
ああ、校長先生。この度はお世話になりまして。
And let me double check. Yeah, they don't have a sprite or art. The man noticed the principal, took off his hat, and bowed.
よろしく頼み申しますぞ。
なんとか今日中で終わらせますんで。しばらくうるさくしますんが、ご容赦を。
Each worker took one of the tools and walked towards the fence where the grass was growing. The engine of the lawnmower was very loud, and the kids who were playing in the schoolyard looked at it curiously.
こらー！危ないですから皆さん教室へ戻りなさい。
It was Chia Sensei. She handed an envelope with the documents in it to the principal. It said Okonogi Gardeners in green on the envelope.
では校長先生、申し訳ありませんが、この請求書を後日市役所に行かれるときに持って行ってください。
心得た。
千恵先生、あの造園屋さんは昨日も来てました？
ええ、昨日の夕方に一度下見に来てもらいました。帰りに近道をしようとして迷ってしまったと言ってましたっけ？
この村は細い道はだいぶ入り組んでおるからの。無理もないわい。
I remembered when I first came here. Chia Sensei started talking about when she got lost and they laughed together. There was never anything suspicious to begin with. I thought they were suspicious yesterday because of what Rena had told me. At first I thought it wasn't unusual to see a white van, but then right after I heard her creepy story, I saw a white van parked on the road and I got scared. The gardeners weren't familiar with the roads of Hinamizawa, and they got lost trying to take a shortcut on their way back. That's all. I had it totally twisted around. I believed that fake-sounding story. I believed that the Sonozaki family was working behind the scenes, and I fabricated the existence of a group of fanatical believers in my mind. Worse, I doubted Mion. Damn it. I'm such a fool. She's my friend. We took each other's hands that day, saying that we were a family made of friends, and that friends were friends no matter what. I said that, but then I doubted my friend. I'm so stupid. Anyway, Irena was the problem. She needed to wake up from this crazy delusion. I had to hurry and wake her up. Rena seemed like she had no mind to listen to anyone else. She truly believes that the Sonozaki family are the masterminds of a large-scale conspiracy. I remember the plate number of the white van, and I also remembered their faces. Without a doubt, this was one of the vans that had been following me. So far, I've confirmed that three of the four cars have been following me. I could especially recall this white van because it followed me around the longest of all. The people who were in the other cars must have been the lookouts, and the ones in this van must be tasked with a direct contact, like kidnapping or assassination. So here's the thing, right? We just had a whole chapter, like the start of the chapter, we had the Rena tell us, hey, this is what's going on in the village. We just had a quick swap over to Keiichi, as he was told by Mion, oh, by the way, that's all a lie. Look at these guys, they're gardeners. Yeah, they were following Rena around all right. And now here we have Rena saying, I was being followed by 4 vans. And they all had different license plate numbers. So, which is it? Is Rena telling the truth? Is she lying? Anyway, the lookouts secure the surroundings, and the ones in this van attack the target. That's a common maneuver involved in both kidnapping and assassination. The scrapbook said that too. If so, I'd better watch out because it was them, not the lookouts, who came to the school premises. I don't think they'll attack me while I'm in school. They're in the early stages of their covert operation now, hiding their fangs and claws until the last stage of their horrifying scheme. That's why they won't take action in the school, where the people are watching. But it looked like they were talking with Chie-sensei in a very friendly way. I could only hear bits and pieces of the conversation, but it sounded very suspicious. I want to double check one quick thing too, specifically with this text. Just give me 1 second. Okay, it is. So, one thing that I noticed was at the very start of the chapter, whenever we swapped over to Rena's perspective, the text color was a very bright pink. And I noticed at some point a while ago that her text kind of got a little bit darker, almost red. Here it looks almost red, but it isn't. It's still a shade of pink. It's a little closer to orange now, or sorry, it's a little darker. It's nearing a more reddish hue instead of pink, but it used to be a very bright pink. It slowly started getting a little bit darker. The last time that I checked this, it was still noticeably pink, but now it's getting closer to like a peach, like a like a sunburnt type of color. Anyway, like when a British person visits a hot place, like a place that's like 20 degrees or something outside, it's like 20 Celsius out, and then they turn into lobsters, kind of like that. But anyway, I tried to remember the chatter and the movements of their mouths, and I played my memory of it like a videotape in my mind.
Maido!
どうもご苦労様です。今日も暑いですね。
いいえいいえ。今日
ではすみません。今日もよろしくお願いいたします。
はい、よろしくお願いします。これ、うちの事務屋から渡すように言われましたんで。
と、ですね。ありがとうございます。わあ、空欄ですね。問題ありません。はい、お預かりします。
はい、それでは。りますんで。
I used the information I had to guess what was going on. I played the video again and again in my mind, and also paused it and played it in slow motion again to check many times. Then something unbelievably horrifying started to emerge. There's no doubt that they're acquainted with Chie-sensei, but I've never seen them visit the school before, so it's hard to believe that Chie is their contact. There's no doubt that they're the death squad under the direct control of the Sonozaki family. They have the local accent, which proves that they were chosen from the Sonozaki court. Their death squad was talking with Chie-sensei. They know each other. What's their relationship? Who's Chie anyway? During the dam conflict, Hinamizawa's school was closed, and it was merged with the one in Okinomiya. But the Onigafchi Guardians didn't accept that, and they made a part of the Forestry Service building into a school. But needless to say, the school they made didn't have a teacher, so it was only going to be a token form of resistance. But a teacher who had a strong passion for education felt sorry for the children, and she came to work here. That was Rumiko Chie-sensei. It was obviously strange. Teachers are government employees, and they normally belong to their prefectures. As long as they lie low and don't cause any trouble, they don't get fired, and they don't get demoted. They can work up until the official retirement age, and they are guaranteed to get a fixed retirement fund. She was one of those government employees, but she defied the Board of Education and came to work for Hinamizawa. The villagers admire her as a teacher of passion. I heard that Odio Sonozaki herself successfully negotiated with the Board of Education that suspended Chie for defying their orders. It was easy to get an answer from this by connecting the dots. Chie was recruited by Odio Sonozaki as a teacher to work at the school the Onigafchi Guardians had created. Right, that's what I was thinking as well. If the government isn't going to pay her, they can easily just pay her. Like, the Sonozaki family can just do it. In other words, she was already working for Odio before she came here. As for the principal, he was the principal of the school in Hinamizawa from the beginning. He's a respected person in this region, and he's been closely associated with the three families for a long time. So that means the school has been under control of the Sonozaki family all along. That's why Chie is acquainted with the death squad. It makes sense now. Chie confirmed that I came to school today, made a phone call, and called them here. I don't want to know why she called them here. If she called them just to monitor me, they'd wait near the gate until class was over. But they came onto the school premises. Why? Stop pretending to be a fool, Rena. Do you think nothing will happen if you pretend not to notice it? Think hard and calm down, Rena. What will they try to do to me? What will they try to do to me today in school? In school? How are they going to do anything with my classmates and friends around me? It's easy. Chie will tell them to come to the teacher's office during the last class of the day. What about my clubmates? That's easy too. Chie can easily make them go home early using her authority as a teacher. She can make up any reason she wants. Maybe the classroom is going to have carpentry work done today, so they can't stay in school.
ではすみません。今日もよろしくお願いいたします。
See? There's no doubt. They clearly said they're ready to do it today. And what else?
はい、よろしくお願いします。これ、うちの事務屋から渡すように言われましたんで。
とですね。ありがとうございます。は空欄ですね。問題ありません。はい、お預かりします。
You see, they gave Chia-sensei an envelope with some documents in it. That blank is an eerie phrase. Was my name supposed to be in the blank? Why is it left blank, and what does that mean? I told you, Rena. Do you still think that nothing will happen if you pretend not to notice it? Stop that. So, what it must mean is that it's an order from the higher-ups. It says to make Rena Ryugu become blank. I took a peek from the shadows and I saw the principal taking documents out from the envelope. He started reading them. He looked stern, he looked very serious. I wished I could take a peek at the documents, but I was too far away. I kept looking at him just to see if he'd react at all, and then the envelope caught my eye. The envelope said Okonogi Gardeners, and it had some numbers that looked like a phone number. Fortunately, I have good eyesight. I memorized the number. If they're a death squad, the gardening company must be a camouflage occupation. It probably doesn't exist. I wanted to find out. I looked for a phone. There's only one phone, and it's in the teacher's office. Fortunately, the teachers were chatting in the hallway, looking at the gardeners. It was now or never. I made sure nobody was watching me go into the teacher's office. I rushed in and grabbed the phone on the principal's desk. I went over the phone number in my head, then dialed it up. I'm glad they have a touch tone phone. It would have been difficult if it was a rotary dial. Right. So by that she means a phone that, has numbers that you can press, compared to the other one, like the one that we saw in the cutscene or not the cutscene, but when we were looking at things through Rena's perspective. In the background, she had a rotary phone. Goddamn. If somebody answered, I'd only have to ask, is this the Okonogi Gardeners? I'd wait for the answer before hanging up. It should be easy. It connected. I felt a cold chill run through my body from the bottom of my feet. Wait, don't make a quick judgment. I might have remembered the wrong number. No, I know I remembered it right. It was an easy number to remember. It's impossible to remember it wrong. Then, did I dial it wrong? I put the phone down and started over. This time I dialed the number more slowly. The teachers might come back at any time. In that situation, it was risky to do anything slowly, but I needed to make absolutely sure.
客様がおかけになった電話番号は
It's the same. There's no doubt. The company, Konogi Gardeners, doesn't exist. It's just a camouflage occupation for the Sonozaki family's death squad. That is quite something. Now again, assuming this is real, assuming Rena is right, then yeah, this is definitely happening. Assuming she's just exaggerating, it could be that she misremembered the number or something. But that's like what you should be thinking about while you're playing through this.
番号をお確かめの上、もう一度ダイヤルしてください。お客様がおかけになった電話番号は
I was too stunned to put down the receiver. The announcement kept running over and over. The voice was cold and creepy. I hung up the phone and rushed out of the teacher's office. I ran to the bathroom and held my head in an attempt to cool down. Calm down, Rena. Calm down, Rena. Stay cool. Rena, I wasn't safe here anymore. If I stayed here, I might be erased, even in the open. They'd erase me? Why? They aren't certain that I have the scrapbooks. I told Keiji where I hid the scrapbooks. Yesterday I told him I hid them in my hideout in the garbage dump. Is Keiji in cahoots with the Sonozaki family? I felt as if my head was a pot that was cooking some dubious stew. There was only soup in my brain. I cut up clues, information, and facts just like you cut vegetables and threw them into the pot. Some of them were floating on the surface and others were on the bottom of the pot. They were being cooked in a boiling soup. No, it can't be Keiji. Keiichi's on my side. He's the only one who's on my side. He held out his hand to me in the trash piles. There was no lie in that hand. When he grabbed my wrist, I felt nothing but his strong and pure heart. He promised me he'd be on my side. I shouldn't doubt Keiji. He's the only one I should trust. He's the only one who's on my side right now.
ごめんごめん、ケイチ君。危うく君を疑いそうになった。本当にごめんね。本当にごめんね。
I said it out loud on purpose, full of regret that I doubted Keiji, the only one who was on my side. Now that I think about it, whether I have the scrapbooks or not might not matter to them. Erase anyone who's suspicious. That's the safest way. Does that mean they're in a hurry? The day of Yashiro-sama's revival might be just around the corner. And that's why they're trying to get rid of any small bones, any small fish bones that are stuck in the throat by any means before it's too late. We don't need her anymore. Just erase her if you're worried so much. I could easily picture Oryo Sonozaki saying that. Picture? No, she did say that. That's why they're here today. What should I do? What should I do? Should I wait until school is over? I was like a fish in a pond. No matter how many times I escaped from the net, I was in a pond and they owned the pond. I didn't stand a chance. Then what should I do now? I couldn't keep escaping from the net. I should get out of the pond. I didn't know how to fight them. I didn't know who's on my side. I was about to give in to despair. For now, I'd have to think about how to survive this. So I'd at least have time to think about how to fight against them. I have to get out of this pond. When I was about to leave the bathroom, one of my classmates came in. I pretended to be sick and talked to the girl while leaning on the
ご
wall.
めんね。私、ちょっとどうしても具合が悪くて。早退するからって先生に伝えておいてくれないかな。
I shouldn't let Chia-sensei know that I'm leaving school early if I'm trying to run away from them. But if I didn't, they might think I ran away without cause. That might lead them to chase after me without mercy. If that happens, I don't stand a chance. Also, give me 1 second. They were planning to capture me after school is over, but I happened to feel sick and left school early. If they took it that way, they wouldn't think that I noticed the noose tightening around me. I was about to go back to the classroom to get my bag, but I changed my mind and turned around. I didn't need my bag anymore. I realized nobody was watching me, so I stopped pretending to be sick and started running.
Hmm? 千恵先生、ここがおかしいですぞ。
おかしい？どうかなさいましたか？
見積書と請求書の日付が空欄になっておりますぞ。ここは今日の日付ではないのですかな？
ああ、そこはお役所の都合らしいんです。見積書の日付と請求書の日付が同じだとなんだか都合が悪いそうで、庶務係さんから空欄にするようよく念を押されています。
あとそれから請求書に書いてある電話番号と封筒に書いてある電話番号が違っていますぞ。どちらが正しいのですかな？
あらやだ、本当ですね。社長
はい。どうしましたんね？
請求書に書いてある電話番号と封筒の電話番号が違ってますけど、どちらが正しいのですか？
Oh, we recently changed numbers. It's actually this one.
あははは。請求書の方の電話番号が正しいんで大丈夫ですね。先代の事務所の時の封筒がまだだいぶ余ってたもんなんで、それに入れてきてまったんですわ。
The envelope we used at our former office.
すんませんね。バイトの子に全部新しい番号のハンコを押しとくように言ったんだけどな。すんまへんすんまへん。消しておいてもらえますかね。
And that's the end of the chapter. It sounds very believable, right? What if Rena was imagining all this? What if Rena was saying the truth? We'll have to find out as we continue with the chapters. So we're about to start chapter 10. There's 5 chapters left. There's 15 total, if I recall. And as we know, the finale is very long. The finale is gonna take literally like it's gonna take a fourth of a day to get through. Or sorry, a fifth of a day to get through. It's gonna be 5 hours. And it's something that I just kind of have to let play on auto. So we're gonna have to worry about that when we come to it. But for now, let's go ahead and read the final tip for today, which is Lunch Takeout List 3. The danger of a culture-bound syndrome lies in the fact that it can easily trigger delusional misidentification syndrome. That is to say, in the current case, every time the patient sees something trivial, she tries to interpret it as a curse. And it is believed that as a result of the accumulation of these events in an understandable form, a delusional system is created, ultimately leading to paranoia. Furthermore, the patient is also exhibiting slight signs of personality disorder. Of course, it is a very mild level, and it's not causing any hindrance whatsoever to the patient's daily life. It's common for even healthy individuals to have primary delusions in their daily lives, but they usually ignore it automatically without recognition, since those delusions are nonsensical. However, there are cases where these delusions accumulate despite being incomprehensible. It largely depends on the particular characteristics of the individual, and it's believed that the patient shows relatively strong characteristics in this area. I believe you're very much aware that the primary delusions are categorized into 3 different kinds. Delusional mood is the feeling of impending crisis without basis. Delusional intuition is the feeling of a sense of duty or goal without basis. Delusional perception is the feeling of a baseless cause against a baseless target. In the patient's case, it is believed that these incomprehensible delusions acted out simultaneously with a culture-bound syndrome, which triggered a delusional misidentification syndrome. And it ultimately caused the incomprehensible delusion to become understandable by interpreting them as a curse. The comprehensible delusional system induces understandable secondary delusions, further strengthening the patient's delusional system with the passage of time. The delusional parasitosis mentioned earlier can be considered secondary delusion. A common factor of all cases of paranoia is that even after an outbreak, they still appear perfectly normal with no change in their personalities. Remember that delusional parasitosis was the effect in which you're basically crazy and you think that you're seeing bugs all over you, or that you've got parasites inside of you. The patients are unaware of their own ailments, and due to their personal interpretations of their delusional system, there are many cases where patients arm themselves logically, making it extremely difficult for a third party to point out that they're having a delusion. Furthermore, although it may depend on the tendency of the delusions, there are also cases where a persecutory delusion turns into a pursuit delusion, or a conspiracy delusion resulting in the patient creating an imaginary enemy and taking up antisocial behavior. For example, there are cases where believers of a religious cult were deeply influenced by the cult's founders' paranoid visions, which shifted the group into a conspiracy delusion, and that made them conduct antisocial behavior in the name of self-defense. Although no such cases have been reported in Japan yet, it could very well happen in the near future. Fortunately, the patient hasn't reached that serious condition as of now. With proper treatment, she should be able to make a full recovery. Please make sure that her father also understands that this is not an unusual case, but something caused by the accumulation of a number of innocent factors that anyone could have. The patient can be treated only by deepening her bond with her father. As long as she has that bond, she can certainly be treated. For the reasons above, if the patient is to return to her home village, I strongly recommend that the patient continues to receive guidance from specialized medical institutions. Please excuse me for writing such a long letter. Thank you for reading this until the very end. So of course, was Rena imagining all this? Was this all just in her mind? Is this all part of her trauma from her parents' divorce? Who knows? For all we know, it's real. For all we know, it's fake. For all we know, she's imagining everything. But what do you think? That's the important part. And that's the game you should be playing in your head. Is Rena actually insane? Was she driven to these delusions of grandeur by Takano and her scrapbook? Who knows? Remember, we were told by Mion that Takano is this fucking like nutcase. For all we know, Mion is lying to us. But for all we know, she's telling the truth. Which is it? Who knows? But we will find out later on, as we continue with more Higurashi tomorrow. In the meantime, let's go ahead and swap on over to the ending screen.